All right, let's get right into it. We're about to unpack one of the biggest, most baffling contradictions you'll find in modern law. It's a real head-scratcher, a paradox that gets to the very heart of how we decide what's dangerous and what's legal.
So on one side, you've got tobacco. The CDC says it kills about 480,000 Americans every single year. It's the leading cause of preventable death on the entire planet. And, you can buy it at any gas station. Then on the other side, you have cannabis. And in all of human history, there are exactly 0 confirmed deaths from a direct overdose. 0. Yet for a long time, just having it could get you thrown in a cage.
So the big question is, how did we get here? How did the thing that literally kills hundreds of thousands of people become totally normal, while the plant that's never directly killed anyone become public enemy number 1? Well, the answer has almost nothing to do with your health.
To really get it, we have to rewind the clock way, way back. Because you have to understand, tobacco wasn't just another product in America. For centuries, tobacco was America.
I mean, think about it. In 1612, the Jamestown colony is about to completely fail until tobacco comes along and saves it. By the 1620s, it wasn't just a popular crop. It was actual legal currency. You could literally pay your taxes with it. And of course, this whole economic machine was built on the backs of enslaved people. So much of the money that funded the American Revolution came straight from those tobacco fields.
So here's the bottom line. By the time scientists in the 1950s started raising serious red flags about health, it was way too late. Tobacco was already woven into the very fabric of the American economy. It was a massive industry, a huge employer, a tax revenue giant. It was, quite simply, too big to fail.
Okay, so that's tobacco. Now let's flip over to cannabis. For most of American history, it was totally legal. You could buy it in pharmacies, doctors prescribed it, heck, George Washington grew it. So what happened? Well, everything changed in 1937, and it was really driven by a handful of very powerful men with their own agendas.
You've got 3 main players in this story. First, Harry Anslinger. He was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and with alcohol prohibition ending, he desperately needed a new villain to keep his agency funded. Then there's William Randolph Hearst, the media tycoon. He owned huge forests for paper, and he saw hemp as a cheap, major threat to his business. And finally, you have the DuPont family. They had just put a fortune into patenting nylon, and hemp fiber was its biggest competitor.
So Anslinger did something very clever and very cynical. He stopped using this scientific term cannabis, or the industrial term hemp, and started using this foreign-sounding word, marijuana. This was a tactic. He and Hearst then launched this insane newspaper campaign, full of made-up stories about reefer madness, all designed to stir up racial panic by linking the plant to Mexican immigrants and black jazz musicians.
And all that propaganda led to the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. Now here's the thing. It didn't actually make cannabis illegal. No, it just put a tax on it. A tax of $100 per ounce, which in today's money is over $2,000. It basically made being a legal user completely impossible.
Okay, let's jump forward a few decades. The Cultural Revolution of the 1960s is in full swing, and a new president, Richard Nixon, decides to take this whole thing to a completely different level.
And get this, Nixon actually created his own commission to study marijuana. They did the research, and they came back and told him they should decriminalize it. They said the laws were doing more harm than the drug itself. So what did Nixon do? He took their report, threw it in the trash, and in 1971, he officially declared a war on drugs.
Which leads to the obvious question, right? Why would you declare a war on something your own hand-picked experts are telling you isn't the real enemy? What was really going on? Well, years later, we got a shockingly honest answer from one of his top guys.
In an interview, Nixon's domestic policy chief, a guy named John Ehrlichman, just laid it all out. He said, look, the Nixon White House had 2 enemies, the anti-war hippies and black people.
He went on to explain that, look, you can't make it illegal to be against the war, and you can't make it illegal to be black. But if you can get the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and black people with heroin, and then criminalize both heavily, well, then you can disrupt their communities, you can arrest their leaders, raid their homes, and basically ruin them on the nightly news.
Then the journalist asked the final killer question. Did you know you were lying about the drugs? Ehrlichman's answer, of course we did.
And the impact of that lie? It's been catastrophic. You can see it right here in the data. For decades, studies have shown that white and black Americans
use drugs at almost the exact same rate. But black Americans have been arrested for it at rates that are just off the charts. The policy did precisely what Ehrlichman said it was designed to do.
But the source material for this explainer suggests there's an even bigger game being played here, an economic one. It argues that to understand the real story, you need to stop focusing on the leaf and start following the land.
Just look at the legal drugs for a second, tobacco and alcohol. To produce those at scale, you need a massive amount of capital. Huge farms, factories, distribution networks, the whole shebang. That makes them really easy to centralize and for a few big companies to monopolize. But cannabis, it's a weed. It can grow almost anywhere and anyone can grow it. It's naturally resistant to being controlled by a monopoly. Now check out the timing during the Nixon years, because this is wild. June 1971, he declares the war on drugs a move to control what you can grow. Just 2 months later, August 1971, he takes the U.S. off the gold standard, seizing control of the money supply. Then, by 1973, his team brokers the petrodollar deal, tying the global economy to American-controlled energy. Plants, money, and energy, all brought under centralized control in just about 2 years.
So the argument from the source is pretty clear. These weren't just random, separate policies. They were all part of the same big project, consolidating control over the absolute essentials of the economy. It was never about health. It was always about control.
And this created this really destructive cycle. Declassified documents have shown how covert operations sometimes helped fuel the drug supply. That supply would then create a crisis back home. And that crisis was the perfect justification for a crackdown that allowed the government to seize assets and power from those same communities Nixon wanted to target.
And don't think this is just ancient history. It's still happening. Even in states where cannabis is legal, look at how the markets are being set up. You've got these insane licensing fees, mountains of regulations, and only a few permits to go around. They're basically creating the exact monopolistic system that the plant itself naturally fights against.
So it all leaves us with one last, pretty challenging question. What if this whole century-long story of drug laws was never really about what these substances do to your body, but about who gets to control them and who gets to profit?